Today, I got my buddy Alex Inabnet, founder of Inabnet Companies, and a man who builds faith, family, fitness, and full-scale developments with all the same intensity. How do you choose a new market to go into?
The three markets, San Diego, Austin, and Tampa, that we're currently involved in, it's really just been based off of my real estate experience, whether that's commercial construction or hard money lending.
Your number one piece of advice is just to go actually meet people when you're going into a new market.
Correct, absolutely. It's truly parking yourself somewhere for at least half a year and making that your main goal.
When you came to the same gym, right? And within 2 weeks, you were already talking to more people than I talked to the entire time on a daily basis. Sending emails and setting something up and then you're kind of forced to do it is a huge part of it. We all get the same 24 hours. So why is it that some people build so much more with them? I'm Brian Coons, and this is the Builder Nation podcast, where we talk to top performers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries to uncover the architecture of a meaningful and fulfilling life. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Builder Nation podcast, where we interview millionaire entrepreneurs who have learned to use leverage to do more than 99% of people, all with the same 24 hours. And today, I got my buddy Alex Inabnet, founder of Inabnet Companies, and a man who builds faith, family, fitness, and full-scale developments with all the same intensity. He's a lover of God, family, and fitness. And in his own words, he spends his days herding cattle, both in business and in life. So, Alex, developers are pulling back. Apartment sale volumes have fallen exponentially and financing is tighter than ever. While construction inputs keep rising, yet you're still active in San Diego, Tampa, and Austin, running 5 integrated divisions and a fund. What actually separates winners from the casualties in the market?
Oh man, loaded question. First off, Brian, thanks for having me on this.
Absolutely.
You and I have connected personally, I think over the last couple of years anyways. And it's been cool to see you put all your visions together and implement that and push the needle forward. So thanks for having me on this. And to answer your question, I think people focus a lot on the negative in like market cycles, and we've been in depending on what market you're in, real estate market, we've been in a pretty heavy downturn or a flat line, if you will, with over the last 2 to 3 years. So I've kind of taken the Warren Buffett approach, or in my mind anyways, to where kind of double and triple down on acquisitions and pushing projects forward through the last 2 to 3 years, given that interest rates are higher, that financing is harder to get, and so on and so forth. What happens in cycles like this is there's more construction superintendents, project managers for hire that are qualified, more than overqualified for construction projects. And, lenders have to put food on their table. Otherwise they'll change industries. So, there are creative ways to work things out on the either hard money or banking side. When markets are a little wonky or funky like they are now. And, not only just that, but pricing for acquisition costs, depending on what market you're in. San Diego is a little different, but for example, Austin, Texas, the acquisition costs for purchases for development projects, the last 2 to 3 years has been the time to purchase, while others are, kind of on the sidelines focused on the opportunities that they overpaid for from 2020 to 2020 or 2018 to 2023 or 2022. And trying to, psychologically take the opposite approach to strategically acquire opportunities that are located in very hot markets and infill areas like close to downtown San Diego, downtown Austin, in beach areas of San Diego, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so how do you craft a narrative when you're raising money like that from sophisticated investors in a market like this to actually get them to say yes?
Oh man, it is. I'll say that the capital raising portion of this strategy is, really if you're in a hotter market, it is, or hotter cycle, it is easier to raise funds. But ultimately, I'm currently on my 11th development project, and having past investors where there has been successful projects, that obviously helps, having the track record. over the last 2 or 3 years, because of the market, it has been harder to raise capital. And so I would say that the timing and the conversations and video chats and phone calls and stuff for the capital raise side has, doubled and tripled for the time spent. And the new investor count has increased due to, the uncertainty of what's happening in the real estate market over the last couple of years. It's really just instilling a comfortability for the investor, I'd say. We hold monthly investor update calls if we're doing our direct to project investment development deals, which are typically residential multifamily. And then for the private equity fund, we have quarterly update calls with our investor pool. So just giving them being the investors, giving them, the peace of mind that, yes, we understand that this is a risky time to invest, but, contact information is provided. We have update calls. You get access to bank transactions. We're very transparent about all those things, just so that, it's not like we're taking the money and running. These projects, residential multifamily deals can last 18 months to 36 months. And then on the commercial side, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 years just to get the project stabilized. That's not even on the rent side. But, just instilling some comfortability and peace of mind that, questions will be answered, that they have a voice, and they'll be provided, visual representations of what's going on each project.
Yeah. So you honestly, I mean, it sounds like the biggest thing with investors is just keeping them updated and informed throughout, no matter what, right?
Yep, correct. Even if things go completely sideways.
So that's a good question. How do you handle situations that go poorly as the general partner?
I just think transparency and honesty is key in these cases. Or you're right, whether it's a friend or family member or high net worth or family office, institutional investor, whoever it is, just making sure that during each of those update calls that we hold, that we're discussing market trends. We are being honest about where our construction dollars are going, or where our design soft costs are going if we're in design before construction. And again, it's just instilling a comfortability in the investor pool, because our, from the private equity fund even to the direct to project investments, I structure them as GP, LP, Class A, Class B, whatever you want to call it, syndications. So just the communication is what's most important, and the honesty of, if something does go down. I mean, I've been a part of a project in the past where I've had to sell the luxury home, and pay the buyer money to take it off my plate. So obviously there was no money made on that deal, and I can, confidently say that on a call like this, because it's a true learning experience. Because when I look back at doing that deal, the timeline of the purchase was when the market was at its peak. So it's a true learning experience to, go through and have on a track record to say, okay, well, if the market's hot, you actually need to be less greedy and more greedy when the market's cold. So that's, or less hot. So that's kind of how, as things have transpired over the last, call it 24 to 36 months, that's kind of how I've led it.
Okay. And how does that affect how you're looking at deals now?
Great question. So I'd say that in all my underwriting for any project, whether it's commercial, mixed use in the private equity fund or the direct to project residential multifamily side, I always try to include probably anywhere from 25 to 30% more dollars for, than I think I would need for soft costs, especially same thing for hard costs. And then if there's still a minimum IRR projection of in the range of, 20 to 25%, then that's how I know that it's, a decent deal. I think the biggest thing on the underwriting side for this question is the projected end values, because again, these projects can last a year and a half all the way up to, 4 years, depending on if it's residential or commercial. And so really sticking to what the current market is showing for the end value projections, even though the project won't be completed for a while in the future. And if it's still hitting that, 2x equity multiple or in the range of the 20 to 25% IRR, that's how I know it's a good deal that we should move forward with.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you choose a new market to go into?
The three markets, San Diego, Austin, and Tampa, that we're currently involved in, it's really just been based off of my personal real estate experience, whether that's commercial construction or hard money lending. And so those three markets have been the three markets that I've personally been involved in for really since 2015. And so being plugged into relationships, I think, is important for, outside of the three that we're in now. If there wasn't a fourth or fifth in the future, the assessment that I've come up with, it takes about 6 months to really get plugged in to a new market, like knowing who the players are on the development side, getting to know subcontractors, getting to know lenders, really having I think the most important thing in that 6 months is having a face-to-face presence, creating those relationships, because, kind of like you and me, like you and I met from me kind of coming in and out of San Diego after I had lived there for a handful of years, and I was in Texas, so I was coming back and forth. So the in-person relationships are what's important. I think, it's tremendously hard to get involved into a new market with a significantly sized deal if you don't know the city, if you don't know the architects or I'm sorry, the designers or engineers or the subcontractors, because then you're just making on-the-fly decisions based off cost estimates that you're getting via email, versus creating that personal relationship with those individuals through that first 6 months.
Yeah, so your number one piece of advice is just to go actually meet people when you're going into a new market.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, it's truly parking yourself somewhere for at least half a year and making that your main goal to, if it's development, to, like I said before, get in front of those individuals that that you're going to be hiring and working with through your project. If you don't know anybody, then, start with maybe a friend that may be in the space. If you don't have a friend there, then Google's your best friend. So then Google the top 5 designers, engineers, subcontractors for each trade, and just get face to face with them. Call them, email them, set meetings at their office or coffee or lunches. And once that relationship's created, they know that you're a real person and not just somebody that's going to email them electronically.
Right. So, no, it makes sense. It's so funny, man. Like with you, when you got into, when we met, like I always joked when you came, to the same gym, right? Within 2 weeks, I'd been there 2 years. And within 2 weeks, you were already talking to more people than I talked to the entire time on a daily basis. And that's such a good, I think, skill to have, is just being able to go for, even if it's like forcing yourself, if you're not like an extrovert by trade, like sending emails and setting something up and then you're kind of forced to do it is a huge part of it.
Like, yeah. And that's another thing too, I think the contacts I mentioned have been primarily real estate development focused, but really find the top 2, like most popular gyms that people go to, and join that gym. If you're in faith and a Christian or any type of religion, for me, it's joining a church that I really resonate with, that has individuals that love God and think like I do. And there's relationships that are created from, the gym, churches, from any hobbies that you may have. San Diego's big, surfing, hiking, exterior things. Pickleball is another one too. So join a pickleball group, and, you'll see, if you do 2 or 3 of those things and you work out a lot and you go to church every week and you play pickleball once or twice a week, after a month, there'll be a whole new Rolodex of contacts that it may not be in real estate, but those people can lead you to the second, third, fourth, and fifth level connections that you need.
Yeah, I think you're explaining something extremely intelligent right there, where it's like you're doing something that you're putting yourself in a position to not only better yourself because you're literally going to church, you're going to the gym, you're exercising on a regular basis, but you're going to attract those same exact people that have the same exact vision and goals for their life. And you're saying like maybe they aren't an inherent, maybe they aren't the architect, right? But maybe they know somebody who has $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 that they're looking to invest in a development project, and all of a sudden they're fit for the fund. Or hey, like they have a rental that they're sitting on, and they needs a property manager for it, and you can
Right.
facilitate that. So all of a sudden, like there's so many things that they could solve from one singular Sunday afternoon that you're going and playing pickleball.
Yeah, and I will say that there is it's definitely there's more of a strategic way to do it. I think if just speaking to anybody in general, if you're trying to enter into a new market, and we'll use that 6-month timeline that I mentioned previously as an example. If you're parking yourself somewhere for 6 months and joining a gym or joining extracurricular activities, that you'll be around other people that think like you and that could potentially help out. The strategy behind that is if you come in guns a-blazing and the first week you're just really trying to pull information out of people versus create the relationship first and actually see if you want to pursue a friendship. I think that there's definitely a strategy behind that too. Like the main goal is to surround yourself around like-minded individuals and create friends. And then what you'll see later down the line, hopefully in that 6 months, maybe longer, is that once there's trust and you have additional contacts and friends in that new market, that things will just start happening per your needs because, that individual likes you, you like that individual, and an actual relationship has been created. We're so just like this podcast is, we're so focused on doing so many things on social media or virtually where relationships can be created. But, I'm a little bit old school, I think, when it comes to this topic, that, the virtual and all those things are very important to use, but in-person relationships still go, I think, such a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, there's this methodology as a business owner where if something can be a phone call, make it a text. If something can be a text, make it an email. If something can be an email, don't do it. Don't say it, or just, whatever, figure it out yourself, right? But it's kind of the opposite way when you're growing the business, is you have to go the other way. Like, yeah, email's cool, or hitting them up on Instagram's cool. Let's get on a phone call. If you're, not in the local area, you're not, or a Zoom is better than that. But if you're in the local area, like, hell yeah, every single time you should be actually going and meeting up with them, because all of a sudden you're now a real person. You aren't a real person when you're on a phone call. Like, you can still help out and people want to help, but it's so hard to get the vibe. And that's what grows a relationship, is actually knowing that they're a real person. So that's super important.
Yeah. I'll say just one last thing too, is how to kind of combine both of those strategies together into one to help streamline that process and I'm just talking from my previous experience because, man, I'm like so mobile between the 3 markets we cover. What I'll do and what's worked in the past is, if you go to a certain gym, or if you're really trying to target somebody in real estate, through an existing development project, you can show that individual that you're either at their project or at their site by just, going to that project, or going to their office, or going to that gym, or going to the church, and just taking a quick 30-second video of yourself that shows where you're at, and then texting that video to them so that they can, psychologically, they see your face and they see that you're at the setting that they're familiar with. And so, that's kind of helped streamline my, contact growth process of doing those things here and there, because I know I may not be in that area for a long time, but it helps create that connection that, hey, we're going to the same place, and we share common interests.
Hey guys, if you're a business owner, high income earner, or investor who's been thinking about getting into real estate development but don't have the time to manage the process, this is for you. My company partners with people like you to help unlock the potential of your properties, or even source and manage new small scale development projects. We manage hundreds of ADUs and infill development projects across Southern California, and our team knows how to simplify the process so you can benefit from the upside without managing contractors, permits, or design headaches. Whether you want to develop your own property, explore ways to offset taxes, or just learn how the development model works, head to thebuildernation.com/partner. That's thebuildernation.com/partner, and see how we can help you build more with the same 24 hours. Now back to the show. And no one does that. I think that's so huge, is little things like that separate you. And I'm imagining it much more quickly strengthens the relationships, and that's probably allowed you to grow and to find quality partners, because all of a sudden you stand out to those people because they're like, no one does this, and they understand that that's valuable, and they attract to you, which is probably really huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, so you, like, obviously with all those relationships, you're in 3 different markets. You have a lot of vertical integration in what you're doing. So can you explain kind of how you're vertically integrated and all the different pieces you have rolling?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the initial kind of like how it all came to be. So I graduated college with a construction management degree from Louisiana State University, and then ended up coming to San Diego working for a commercial construction company where I was on, various projects in San Diego. We redid the shops at Carlsbad Mall. We were involved with the One Paseo project in Del Mar, where we had the office buildings and parking garage ground up scopes. And then I spent some time working for a commercial developer in Chula Vista as a project manager for his internal GC business, where we did a 6-story, 145-unit apartment complex and medical office building and a parking garage. And so I just was like, kind of threw myself in there to learn. And that's how I kind of learned the construction process from a commercial level. And then I found myself leaving San Diego in around 2020, started working for a hard money lender as a loan originator just by happenstance, because I did my first duplex flip in Dallas, Texas, and knew how to run trades and knew how to run construction, but I knew nothing about borrowing money. I, came out of pocket, raised some capital, opened like 5 credit cards, maxed out the credit cards, I didn't even know what hard money was. So I got plugged in with a guy that was a fund manager. He owned the private credit fund that I ended up working for. And so that's where I was plugged into Austin and Tampa from that hard money lender that I worked for as a loan originator. So I learned how to underwrite deals and so on and so forth. So through that process as an LO, I was getting my GC licenses silently in Florida and California, because the vision was, okay, well, I've been involved in San Diego, Austin, and Tampa. Let's make this vision nationwide. It was really more so, I thought I was unique because, knowing the underwriting and having a pro forma that I've, fine-tuned over the last five years that will consistently grow over time too. But then also having the GC piece, which I prefer the most out of anything. Inabnet Contracting was founded in Florida, and then I brought it to Texas and California as a foreign entity, and I'm the license holder as the GC in those states. And so after a span of time, things just kind of clicked on, okay, well, I can do this myself. There was a time where I had my development business that was new, and then my GC company that was new, and I still worked for the lender. And the lender was gracious enough to let me originate loans, but then also fund my own projects that I was doing at the time. So from there, I was developer, GC, and I was actually the lender too. I wasn't the owner of the private credit fund, but I was working as a W-2 employee. And so just kind of seeing how all those things work together, those three phases, and the coordination. You had mentioned earlier that I put herding cattle in my day-to-day, and that's truly what real estate development and construction is there's 3 parts of the cattle herding through a single development project. And the first phase is herding all the investor cattle. The second phase is herding all the designer and engineer cattle. And the third phase is herding all the subcontractor cattle. So it's, from my shoes, you really have to know the legal language in the investment documents. You have to really understand which designer and engineer needs to perform what specific task. And then from the construction piece, I write all the subcontract agreements and hire all of our subs. So from there, it's making sure that the scope of work that's included in that subcontract agreement is accurate to help mitigate through any potential future change orders that may happen on site. And so I think to make it all fully integrated takes so much time. And so my biggest thing right now that I'm working on, with the private equity fund, development, construction, property management, all of that, is I'm just one individual that has the Inabnet last name. All of my companies have my last name. So it's not like I can do all of this. So it's on the construction side, that's the most intimate part of the process where you have to have on-site supervision on a daily basis. Well, I'm a mobile guy. I'm not able to be there all the time in each project life cycle through the construction phase. So that's why I have, superintendent and project manager employees that Inabnet Contracting pays. And then on the company ownership level, ensuring that the right partners are brought in to those individual entities. If I do come across somebody that knows what they're doing, is willing to grow, we think similarly, and so on and so forth. And that topic is there's so much more details to discuss on that partnership topic. But, from the private equity side, it's bringing in additional capital partners and family office or institutional investors on my own personal general partnership side with Inabnet Capital Partners, which is the name of the fund. And then potentially bringing in additional development partners on the direct to project stuff like you and I talked about at that for that Lamont Street project. And then over time, bringing I just had a conversation with a guy that is I think he's in his late 40s or 50s. He's been doing property management in San Diego for, I think, 30 plus years. He's interested in a partnership with my property management company. So it's keeping that fully integrated vision alive, where construction company or the property management business hired out by other developers, but then also using that integration to our advantage to increase the margins for our own development projects internally. And that's only possible with the right capital partners and the right strategic partners that either have more experience.
Okay. And how do you choose your partners? Because, when you have 5 different vertically integrated companies, how do you choose the right partners to help you manage those?
On the development side, if we're talking about like direct to project, like residential multifamily development projects that we do, the partnership background that I look for, on the general partnership side, if, it's truly myself and like Inabnet Realty, which is my development company, and another partner for a deal, is I preferably want that individual to be involved in a market for 20 to 30 years. That makes that individual older than me. They have, an extensive track record in the market. They have, designer engineer contacts. They have capital partner contacts. They have subcontractor contacts too. Not that my side doesn't have that. It's just when I look for a partnership on the development side, the biggest thing, I'm only as good as what I know. What I typically pursue is somebody else that's, experienced and has other contacts, and has had success and a good reputation in that market to truly combine forces so that the projections that we're showing in the pro forma and the investment deck can truly be worked on throughout the life cycle of the deal to ensure that that project is completed before we're anticipating, under budget, and we hire the right individuals through, designers and engineers and subcontractors throughout the phase of the deal. I will say, in my past, when I've partnered up with people truly just to provide capital, that's where I've ran into issues, because what happens is, and again, this is just my personal experience, so it may not be like this for everyone else, but from my shoes with the integration, we have, development, investment, and construction integration. So there, using those contacts to fulfill the need is important. But if the partner that I've partnered up with is truly just providing capital and they don't know a single thing about real estate or development or the construction process, then my personal side my time becomes doubled trying to explain every little single thing with that individual throughout the whole entire process. And it can delay the project. It definitely makes me frustrated, and, so on and so forth. So there's other developers that are listening to this in the future. I'm sure that they may say the same thing is, just be wary of partnering up on the general partnership side with somebody that has a lot of money that doesn't know anything about the development process. If that person has a lot of money and has done projects before, and has, 2 to 5 projects completed at the same tier of what you're trying to do on that particular site, then it probably is a better decision, on a partnership.
Yeah, no, that's such good advice. I mean, so many people think that, all money is good money. And I don't think that's always the case. Have you, what would you define as good money and bad money when you're raising?
It just depends on what that capital provider's, equity capital provider's experience is. If you are partnering up with, again, I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone or every situation, but say somebody like, in my shoes that's done, over 10 deals. And then I find, a guy that has made a ton of money in crypto, or like it's a big, tech salesperson and saved up a whole bunch of money. And that individual has the amount of capital that's needed to fulfill the whole investment need, but they've never done a development project. Again, I just would be wary of, it's almost like if you're a single male and you see a very attractive woman, it's like, you see the shiny red object that can fulfill the vision that you have in your head for the deal specifically, but you may be overlooking some detrimental things, based off, just the number of or the amount of money that person has, versus, is this truly going to be a fruitful partnership in making the project better, or as a whole. Now that's on the general partnership side. There are, from limited partners that are just contributing at like a minimum investment amount and stuff like that. I think that's kind of a different conversation, because you can have inexperienced limited partners that can help you fulfill your full investment need, as long as you're discussing the upfront in advance, the expectations of how legally, again, each deal is different, but for my side, typically you have the general partner, Class A member, has 100% voting rights, and the limited partners, Class B members, or the below Class A, have little to no voting rights. So as long as that is being communicated to that limited partner investor, hey, I know that you're inexperienced in this, but I know that you want to invest. You may not know what's going on, and if you don't, that's why we have the monthly update calls to go through the process of the deal in real time. And if you have questions about anything along the way, you can send an email, schedule a call, send a text, whatever it may be. Again, it's just providing comfortability to that person. So you can be more lenient on the limited partner investors. Just know that if somebody is a limited partner, that has little to no voting rights, if you allow them to invest in your deal and they're very on top of things, they may be super needy and ask a whole bunch of questions, call you all the time, text you all the time, email you all the time, which is just a part of the process, right? Like, as the operator, class A general partner of the deal, whatever you want to call it, it is that individual's or company's fiduciary responsibility to provide that information to that limited partner investor. Because on the direct to project investment strategy, what that limited partner is they're a partner with you in that company. So legally, you have to have meeting minutes. Legally, you have to operate together as a company. And if the general partner Class A member is not providing that information to the Class B limited partner, then how is that company going to operate fluently throughout the process? It's probably not, and those relationships are going to be very hard to continue forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And along the same lines is kind of aligning, values and finding the right partners. When you have multiple vertically integrated companies that all make money from the same deal, how do you align incentives to make sure that everyone's aligned for project success?
You mean at
Like from the
the
perspective
estimate?
of, yeah, like the construction wants to make as much money as possible, while the
Yeah.
investor side wants to have it be as cheap as possible to make as much of a return as possible.
Yeah,
How do
so
you?
I can answer this. I think I can answer this in a two-part way. The first part is from the investment company level. So if we're talking about direct to project deals, it's the address LLC that's created where you have, my development company is a Class A, and then you have the limited partners as the Class B. So in the investment offering, in the legal language, the attorney, if the attorney does his or her job when forming the legal documents, which they typically do, is really breaking out and outlining the fees that will be charged throughout the process of the deal. So for example, typically there's a development fee that's charged that goes to the Class A general partner member and not the limited partners. And, there's a general contractor GC fee that's charged either at construction start, or it can be charged through the development life cycle too on a monthly basis, and then deducted once you get to construction. There can be a refi fee that's charged once the project's developed and stabilized. And that refi fee is on top of what the long-term lender charges. And that refi fee goes to the Class A member. And then there could be an accounting fee, throughout the process, because there's, like you have to have a CPA involved. And as the Class A general partner member, you have to pay that CPA to do all the filings and file the taxes and all that stuff. So just being upfront and honest and transparent as you're going through the capital raise with the limited partners and the pool of limited partners to really show them in that initial legal document investment offering what's going to be charged and why that's included in there. The goal isn't to just like take a whole bunch of money from the project. It takes a ton of time, energy, and effort to do all this stuff and a lot of coordination. And, I just structure it typically just to cover expenses that are throughout the life cycle of the deal. The second part to this, and I'll try to get this quickly, on the incentives side of things, is on the construction side directly, which is what I know, pretty much the best, is the guys that I hire to manage the projects on a daily basis. And again, I'm mobile. I'm at the sites a lot when I'm travel around to go to the projects to make sure everything's going well. Is for our project manager superintendent roles, is they make a base salary just from the company, not directly focused on a particular project. But before the construction process starts, there's typically in a residential multifamily deal, there's like 10 construction milestones that will really drive the construction schedule. And those individuals and those employees underneath Inabnet Contracting are communicated with and provided incentives, which are a certain dollar amount, based off their performance of meeting and exceeding those scheduled deadlines of those roughly 10 milestones throughout the life cycle of a construction process. So if X superintendent is able to pour all structural concrete slabs by certain date, then they will get a bonus. And so that's on top of their base salary. And so that just really kind of lights a fire underneath the field management team to push the project forward. Obviously, we have our own internal processes of like how to review change orders, making sure we get costs from the subs before we commit to installing on site, so that all of that's documented and in place, which could then hold up the construction schedule if they're trying to push stuff forward. So we have all this, kind of battle back and forth between cost management and schedule management, but that's a way to incentivize the construction side throughout the construction process.
That's amazing. Well, as we wrap up here, man, it's crazy because we didn't even get into the fact that you're one of the most jacked
All
people
right.
that I know. Like all these other pieces where I mean, you're crushing it, dude, on all sides, from family, friends, business, health. Like it's really cool to see. And I know that you've went through a lot of changes in your life so far. And I want to close out with one question. So, when was the last time that you truly failed, and not publicly but privately? And what did that moment rebuild inside of you?
Oh, truly failed. Shoot, man, I have about, three topics that, I would love to go into detail about, but the main, I'm just a very motivated person and I want to perform well. And so I remember, I think one to share was the reason why I left San Diego, and like right before COVID happened in 2020, was I was working as lead PM for that commercial developer. Basically started up his whole GC business. And, I was 25. I was writing all the subcontract agreements. I was, leading like 14 superintendents, project managers, like all these people leading OAC meetings, and I didn't know what I was doing. Like I had no idea. Like I knew primarily like the baseline stuff to get stuff done, but I just knew that I was underperforming. And the biggest principle of this case was, I wasn't communicating to my boss, who at the he was in his mid 70s, 70-year-old developer that had been developing in Chula Vista or San Diego for 30 plus years. I just wasn't going to his office to communicate that I was struggling. And I was just trying to keep all of it in and work through the issues. Well, I found myself at the time I lived in a high rise in downtown San Diego. I found myself on top of the high rise at like 3 a.m, about to jump off and, land on India Street downtown. And thankfully enough, I called my mom and she answered. She's in Louisiana, so she's 2 hours ahead. She had woken up to go to the gym at 5 a.m. So anyways, she talked me off the ledge. She told me, just like any Southern mom would, that I should probably come closer to home and leave. And so, from that, looking back at that transaction, I think the principle in life is if you're going through something and you're struggling, you really need to make sure that your circle of people around you, that you feel comfortable with discussing what you're going through, and to be vulnerable and open and honest about those particular issues, so that you can then stay in it and pivot through those issues and problem solve and work through it, versus, taking flight and running away. And there's been a few different times in my life where that's been the case. And, pretty much in my teenage years, all the way up to, my late 20s. And it's funny to look back now and say, okay, well, that's the common issue that I had, was I want to perform. I want to do well. I want to be the best. And I internally felt inadequate. And so then I would remove myself from the situation, not discuss what was happening, and then try something else, versus like stick in that issue and really grow from being vulnerable and using my contact base to help me through it.
That's amazing, man. Well, I'm glad we were able to talk today, and happy you're here, man. if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to follow along the journey, if they want to, look at potentially coming in on a deal or using your services, how can they get in contact with you?
So best way is email is alex@inabnet.com. That's alex@inabnet.com. Or you can shoot me a text or a phone call, 318-780-6513. We have a handful of investment vehicles for investors for our ground up development projects in San Diego, Austin, Tampa, and happy to explain those as well as help out in any way.
Dude, I love it, man. Well, I appreciate you, Mr. Alex Inabnet, brand Inabnet, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Brian.
That's it for this episode of the Build a Nation podcast. If it gave you something to think about, hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's leveling up. Until next time, keep building.